The transport ship came down through the purple sky of Zentara Prime. Inside, Katie Morgan pressed her face against the window. She could see the tall buildings of the Galactic Academy below. They looked like giant crystals catching the light of 3 suns. Katie's heart was beating fast. This was really happening. She was going to school with aliens. Katie was 17 years old. She had blonde hair that she kept in a ponytail. Back home in Denver, she was just a regular girl. But here she was something special. She was one of the first humans to study at the Academy. Earth had only joined the Galactic Federation 3 years ago. Most aliens still thought humans were strange and weak. The ship landed softly. Katie grabbed her bag and walked down the ramp. The air smelled different here. Sweet like flowers, but also metallic. The ground under her feet was smooth and warm. Everything was so clean and shiny. Nothing like the streets back home. Other students were everywhere. Katie saw beings she had only read about in books. There was a tall blue creature with 4 arms. A group of rock-like beings that glowed from inside. Something that looked like a floating jellyfish drifted past her. They all stopped to stare at her. Katie tried to smile, but it felt awkward. She wondered if they even understood what a smile meant. A helpful robot guide showed Katie to her room. Then it gave her a map and told her where her first class would be. Katie had 2 hours before class started. She decided to explore the campus. Maybe she could find the cafeteria. She was hungry after the long trip from Earth. The hallways were wide and tall. Everything was built to fit many different sizes of beings. Katie felt small here. Back on Earth, she was average height. Here, she was one of the shortest students she had seen so far. She walked past classrooms with strange equipment. She saw a library that seemed to go up forever. The whole place made her feel excited and nervous at the same time. Katie found a large open area called the Central Plaza. It was like a park, but inside the building. There were plants from different worlds growing in organized sections. Students sat in groups talking and laughing. Well, Katie assumed they were laughing. Some of the sounds were pretty weird. That's when she saw them. A group of large reptile-like aliens stood near the center of the plaza. They were huge, maybe 8 feet tall. Their skin was covered in thick scales that looked like armor. The scales were different colors, red, green, brown. The biggest one had deep red scales with white scars across them. His eyes were yellow and cold. These were Zarkoth. Katie had learned about them in her preparation classes. They came from a warrior culture. On their homeworld, being strong was the most important thing. They respected power and didn't think much of weaker species. They had a reputation for being bullies. Katie tried to walk past them without drawing attention. She kept her eyes forward and walked at a normal pace. Don't look scared, she told herself. Bullies can smell fear. She had dealt with bullies before at her high school on Earth. The trick was to act like they didn't matter. But the big red Zarkoth noticed her. His head turned to follow her movement. Then he smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of a predator that had found something interesting to play with. The Zarkoth stepped into her path. He was so big that he blocked out the light. Katie stopped walking. She looked up at him, way up. He had to be at least 3 feet taller than her. His clawed hands could probably wrap around her whole body. The Zarkoth said something in his own language. It sounded like rocks grinding together. Then his translator device kicked in. Katie heard his words in English. His voice was deep and rough. Look at this, a human. I heard your kind were coming to our academy. You're even smaller than I thought. And so soft-looking. Do you even have bones, little human? Or are you just soft meat wrapped in thin skin? His friends laughed. It sounded like hissing. They moved closer, forming a circle around Katie. Other students in the plaza noticed what was happening. Some turned away. Some watched but didn't help. This was normal behavior for the Zarkoth. Everyone knew it. Nobody stopped them. Katie kept her voice calm and steady. She said, "Excuse me," and tried to step around him. But the Zarkoth moved to block her again. He seemed to think this was funny. He looked back at his friends and made a gesture. They laughed harder. The red Zarkoth leaned down. His face was now close to Katie's. His breath was hot and smelled like sulfur, like rotten eggs. Katie tried not to make a face. She just stood there waiting for him to get bored and let her pass, but he didn't get bored. Instead, he spoke again. His voice was quieter now, meant just for her. "My name is Krex. I am from a family of warriors. We have fought in 100 battles. My claws have torn through armor. My strength is known across 3 systems. What are you, human? What is your strength? You look like something I could break with one hand. Katie felt anger starting to build in her chest. She had traveled across space to study here. She had worked hard to earn her place at this academy. She wasn't going to let some overgrown lizard treat her like a toy, but she kept her face blank. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her angry. My strength is my own business, Katie said. Now please move. I need to get to class, Krex laughed. Class? You think you belong in class with real students? With warriors and scholars from proud species? Humans are barely out of their caves. You discovered space travel just a few cycles ago. You should be grateful we even let you on this world. That's when Krex made his biggest mistake. He reached out with one of his large clawed hands. He grabbed Katie's shoulder. His grip was tight, painful. His claws dug into her shirt. He wanted to scare her. He wanted to show her that he was in control, that she was weak and he was strong. The whole plaza went quiet. Everyone was watching now. Some students looked away, not wanting to see what would happen next. Others watched with sad expressions. They felt bad for the human girl, but what could they do? Krex was bigger and stronger. This was just how things worked with the Zarkoth. Katie looked at Krex's hand on her shoulder. Then she looked up at his face. He was still smiling that predator smile. He thought he had won. He thought she would cry or run away. He expected fear. What he got was something completely different. Katie's expression didn't show fear. It showed focus. Cold, calculating focus. Her body shifted slightly, her weight moving in a way that Krex didn't understand. Her muscles tensed. Her breathing became controlled and steady. Katie had been training in martial arts since she was 6 years old. Judo, karate, and Brazilian jiu-jitsu. She had earned her black belt 3 years ago. She had competed in tournaments. She had sparred with people twice her size. And she had learned something important. Size and strength mattered, but they weren't everything. Technique mattered more. Balance mattered more. Knowing how to use an opponent's own force against them mattered most of all. Krex had no idea what was about to happen. In his culture, combat was about being bigger and stronger. It was about armor and claws and brute force. Nobody had ever taught him about leverage. Nobody had shown him how easily joints could be manipulated. Nobody had warned him about humans. Katie spoke one word. Her voice was quiet but clear. It cut through the silence like a blade. She said, "Release me." It wasn't a plea. It was a warning. The last chance for Krex to back down and walk away. Krex laughed again. He tightened his grip on her shoulder. He started to say something else, something mocking. He never got to finish the sentence. In the next 30 seconds, everything Krex thought he knew about strength and power was about to change forever. Katie moved so fast that most of the watching students didn't understand what happened. One moment she was standing there with Krex's hand on her shoulder. The next moment Krex was flying through the air. His huge body spun in a circle. Then he crashed into the floor with a sound like thunder. The whole plaza shook. What Katie had done was actually simple. She had grabbed Krex's wrist with both hands. Then she had turned her body and dropped her weight down. She had used his own grip against him. All his strength and mass became his weakness. The judo throw was perfect. She had practiced it thousands of times in the gym back on Earth. But she had never thrown anyone as big as Krex before. Krex lay on the ground, stunned. His yellow eyes were wide with shock. He tried to understand what had just happened. How had this tiny human thrown him? It should have been impossible. He was a Zarkoth warrior. He had trained since childhood. He had beaten opponents twice his size. Yet here he was on his back looking up at the ceiling. But Katie wasn't done. She knew that surprising someone wasn't the same as winning. She had to finish what she started. Before Krex could recover, she dropped down beside him. Her movements were smooth and practiced. She grabbed his arm and twisted it behind his back. Then she put her knee into his spine, right between his shoulder blades. She had him locked in a submission hold. 10 seconds had passed since Krex had grabbed her shoulder. Just 10 seconds. And now a human girl had a Zarkoth warrior completely under control. The other students couldn't believe what they were seeing. Some of them had their mouths open. Others had started recording on their devices. This was history happening right in front of them. Krex roared. It was a sound of rage and pain and confusion. He tried to push himself up with his free arm. His muscles bulged. His scales scraped against the floor. He was strong, incredibly strong. But Katie knew about leverage. She knew about pressure points. She shifted her weight and applied more pressure to his shoulder joint. The roar turned into a howl of pain. Katie's voice was calm. She wasn't breathing hard. She wasn't scared. She was completely in control. She said, "Stop struggling. You'll only hurt yourself. Either submit or I will dislocate your shoulder. Your choice." Krex tried one more time to break free. He used all his strength. But human joints could bend in ways that Zarkoth joints couldn't. Katie used this advantage. She adjusted her position slightly. The pain in Krex's shoulder became unbearable. He had felt pain in battle before. He had been wounded and kept fighting. But this was different. This pain was precise and controlled. It told him that one wrong move and something would break. 20 seconds had passed. The other Zarkoth students stood frozen. They didn't know what to do. Should they help their leader? But if they attacked Katie, she might hurt Krex before they could reach her. They could see it in her eyes. She knew exactly what she was doing. This wasn't luck. This was skill. One of the Zarkoth students took a step forward. Katie's eyes snapped to him. She didn't say anything. She just looked at him. Her expression was clear. "Take one more step and your friend gets hurt." The student stopped. He looked at Krex, then back at Katie, then he stepped back. He had made the smart choice. Katie spoke again, still looking at the other Zarkoth. She said, "I don't want to hurt him, but I will if I have to. Tell him to submit. Tell him this is over." Her voice carried across the quiet plaza. Everyone heard her. This small human girl was giving orders to the biggest bullies in the academy. And they were listening. The Zarkoth student who had almost attacked now spoke to Krex in their own language. His words were urgent. He was telling Krex to give up, to stop fighting, that he had lost. Krex didn't want to hear it. His pride was screaming at him to keep fighting. But his shoulder was screaming louder. The pain was getting worse with every second. 25 seconds. Krex's vision was starting to blur from the pain. His powerful muscles were useless in this position. All his training had been about strength and aggression. Nobody had ever taught him how to escape from a submission hold. On his homeworld, warriors fought standing up. They used claws and teeth and raw power. This ground fighting was something new, something he had no defense against. Katie increased the pressure just a little bit more, just enough to make her point. She said, "Last chance. Submit or I break your arm. I really don't want to, but I will." She meant every word. She had learned in her martial arts training that mercy was important, but so was following through on your warnings. If you made a threat, you had to be willing to carry it out. Otherwise, nobody would take you seriously. 28 seconds. Krex felt something he had never felt before in his life. Real fear. Not the fear of losing a fight, the fear of permanent injury. Of being crippled. His pride meant nothing if he couldn't use his arm anymore. He had heard stories of warriors who had been broken in battle. They never fought again. They lived in shame. He couldn't let that happen. The words came out in a gasp. "I yield, I submit. The fight is yours." His voice was quiet, broken. All the arrogance and mockery were gone. He had been completely and utterly defeated. Not just physically, mentally too. Everything he believed about strength and weakness had been shattered in less than 30 seconds. 30 seconds. Katie released him immediately. She stood up in one smooth motion. Her ponytail swung behind her. She wasn't even breathing hard. She had just thrown and submitted a warrior 3 times her size, and she looked like she had just finished a light workout. She brushed some dust off her uniform and picked up her bag from where she had dropped it. Krex slowly got to his feet. He was cradling his arm. It wasn't broken, but it hurt badly. He would feel this for days. His friends rushed over to help him, but he pushed them away. He stood there looking at Katie. His face showed a mixture of emotions. Shock, confusion, anger, and something else. Something he had never felt towards someone he had tried to bully. Respect. Katie looked up at him. Her expression was serious but not cruel. She said, "I gave you a chance to let me go. You should have taken it. Next time someone asks you politely to stop, maybe you should listen. Not everyone is as weak as you think they are. Just because someone looks different or smaller doesn't mean they can't defend themselves." She adjusted her bag on her shoulder. The same shoulder that Krex had grabbed. There would be bruises there later from his claws. But right now, Katie didn't care about that. She had made her point. She turned to walk away, then paused. She looked back at Krex one more time. "And just so you know," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the plaza. "I'm one of the smaller humans at this academy, and I'm not even the best fighter, so maybe think about that before you bother any of my friends." Her words hung in the air like a threat and a promise. Then Katie walked away. She walked through the crowd of students that had formed around them. They parted for her like water. Everyone stared at her, some with fear, some with admiration, some with curiosity. The human girl had just done the impossible. She had defeated Krex in single combat, in 30 seconds, without weapons, without armor, with nothing but skill and determination. Behind her, the whispers started. They grew louder and louder. Students were talking in dozens of different languages, but they were all saying the same thing. "Did you see that? The human just beat Krex. She threw him like he was nothing. How is that possible? I thought humans were weak. Maybe we were wrong about them." Krex stood in the center of the plaza, surrounded by his friends, but completely alone. His reputation was destroyed. Everyone had seen him lose. Everyone had heard him submit. The mighty Zarkoth warrior had been beaten by a small human girl. Word of this would spread across the entire academy by the end of the day, maybe across the entire planet, maybe across the galaxy. Katie found her way to her first class. She sat down at a desk. Her hands were shaking now. The adrenaline was starting to wear off. She had been so calm during the fight, but now she realized how scared she had been. What if she had messed up? What if Krex had hurt her? What if his friends had attacked? So many things could have gone wrong, but they hadn't gone wrong. She had done everything right. Her training had worked. Her confidence had worked. She had stood up for herself and won. Katie took a deep breath and tried to steady her hands. She pulled out her tablet and tried to focus on the upcoming lesson. But she knew that nothing would be the same after this. She had made a statement. She had shown the galaxy what humans could do, and there was no going back from that. By lunchtime, everyone at the Galactic Academy knew what had happened. The video had spread like fire. Someone had recorded the whole thing on their device. Now students were watching it over and over. They showed it to their friends. They sent it to students at other schools. Some uploaded it to the Galactic Network where billions of beings could see it. Katie tried to eat her lunch quietly in the cafeteria, but students kept coming up to her. Some wanted to shake her hand. Others wanted to take pictures with her. A few just stared from a distance. Katie didn't like all the attention. She just wanted to eat her food and maybe make some friends. Normal friends, not fans or followers. A blue-skinned girl with silver eyes approached her table. She spoke carefully, like she was afraid of saying the wrong thing. Her name was Lyra, and she was from a planet called Xenos 4. She asked if she could sit down. Katie nodded and smiled. Finally, someone who just wanted to talk like a normal person. Lyra said, "That was amazing what you did. Krex has been bullying students for 2 years. Nobody ever stood up to him before. Everyone was too afraid. You're really brave." Katie shrugged and said she wasn't brave, just tired of bullies. She had dealt with them on Earth too. They were the same everywhere, it seemed. Big and mean and thinking they could do whatever they wanted. More students came to sit with them. A tall insect-like being named Click, a fuzzy creature that looked like a walking teddy bear named Palm, a student made of living crystal named Shine. They all had stories about Krex. He had pushed Click into a wall once. He had stolen Palm's homework and destroyed it. He had mocked Shine's appearance and called her worthless. The list went on and on. Katie listened to all their stories. She felt angry on their behalf. How had Krex gotten away with this for so long? Where were the teachers? Where were the security guards? Lyra explained that the Zarkoth had political power. Krex's family was important on his homeworld. They had connections in the Federation. Complaints against Krex always disappeared. He had been expelled from schools before, but he always came back. That afternoon, something unusual happened. All the students were called to the main auditorium. Katie wondered if she was in trouble. Maybe fighting wasn't allowed at the academy. Maybe she would be expelled. She felt nervous as she walked into the huge room. Thousands of students were already there, sitting in rows that went up to the ceiling. The room could hold beings of all different sizes. Professor Zentar was on the stage. He was a Voxian, which meant he had 3 eyes, purple skin, and tentacles instead of arms. He taught biology and was known for being very smart and very fair. He waited for everyone to sit down. Then he spoke. His voice was amplified so everyone could hear. He had turned off his translator. He wanted everyone to hear him in their own language through their personal devices. Professor Zentar said today something important happened at our academy. A new student, a human named Katie Morgan, was confronted by another student. That student grabbed her without permission. He tried to intimidate her. He wanted to make her feel small and afraid. Instead, she defended herself. She used skill and training to protect herself from harm. She did nothing wrong, the professor continued. He said, but this incident has shown me something troubling. Many of you have been making assumptions about humans. You think they are weak because they are smaller than many species. You think they are primitive because they are new to space travel. You think they are soft because they don't have scales or armor or natural weapons. Today proved that all of these assumptions are wrong. Let me explain why. A huge hologram appeared above the stage. It showed diagrams of human biology. The professor pointed at different parts with his tentacles. He said, look at the human skeletal structure. They have more joints than most species. This gives them incredible flexibility. Look at their muscular system. It's designed for endurance, not just strength. A human can run for hours without stopping. Most predators on their world give up long before a human does. The hologram changed to show Earth. Professor Zentar said humans come from what we call a death world. The temperature swings are extreme. The weather is violent. They have hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, and volcanoes. They have predators that can kill them easily. They have diseases and parasites. They have other humans who make war on each other. Yet humanity survived all of this. They didn't just survive. They thrived. They became the dominant species on their planet. The professor looked directly at where Krex was sitting. He said humans developed something that many species never needed. They developed combat systems, martial arts, hundreds of different fighting styles created over thousands of years. They learned how to defeat opponents bigger and stronger than themselves. They learned about leverage, balance, and pressure points. What Miss Morgan demonstrated today was judo, just one of many human fighting styles, and she is not even a master. She is still a student. The room was completely silent. Every student was listening carefully. The hologram now showed videos from Earth. Human athletes doing incredible things, gymnasts flipping through the air, martial artists breaking boards with their bare hands, swimmers racing through water, runners completing marathons, climbers scaling mountains. The variety of human physical achievement was amazing, Professor Zentar said, but physical ability is not the most dangerous thing about humans. The most dangerous thing is their mind. Humans are problem solvers. They are adaptable. They never give up. If you knock a human down, they get back up. If you defeat them once, they learn from it and come back stronger. They have a saying on Earth, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. This is the human philosophy. The professor's 3 eyes moved across the audience. He said, and there is one more thing you must understand about humans. They are pack animals. They form bonds with each other that are incredibly strong. If you harm one human, the others will come to their defense. They are loyal to their friends and family. They will risk their own lives to protect those they care about. This makes them formidable not just as individuals but as a group. Katie felt embarrassed as all eyes turned to look at her. She hadn't asked for this attention. She had just defended herself. But Professor Zentar was making a point. He was using what happened to teach everyone a lesson. Katie understood why. If the students learned now to respect humans, maybe there wouldn't be more incidents. Maybe other human students wouldn't have to go through what she did. Professor Zentar said, I am telling you all of this not to make you fear humans, but to make you respect them. Respect all species. Never judge someone by their appearance. Never assume that different means weak. The galaxy is full of diverse life forms. Each one has evolved in unique ways. Each one has strengths and weaknesses. The purpose of this academy is to learn from each other, to understand each other, not to establish who is superior. Then the professor did something unexpected. He asked Krex to stand up. The big Zarkoth slowly rose from his seat. His head was down. His shoulders were slumped. He looked nothing like the arrogant bully from that morning. Professor Zentar, said Krex, you have been a problem at this academy for too long. You have hurt other students. You have created an atmosphere of fear. Today you learned a valuable lesson, but learning is not enough. You must change. You must apologize. Not just to Miss Morgan, but to every student you have wronged. Krex stood there for a long moment. Everyone was watching him, waiting to see what he would do. Would he refuse? Would he walk out? Would his pride prevent him from doing the right thing? Katie watched him too. She didn't know what she wanted him to do. Part of her wanted him to suffer more. He had hurt so many students. But another part of her, the part that had learned compassion from her parents and teachers, hoped he would choose to be better. Finally, Krex spoke. His voice was quiet but clear. He said, "I apologize. I was wrong. I thought strength was the only thing that mattered. I thought being feared made me powerful. But I was weak. Truly weak. Because I used my size to hurt others. I made others feel small to make myself feel big. That was cowardly. Katie Morgan showed me what real strength looks like. It's not about size. It's about courage and skill and standing up for yourself. I have much to learn, and I hope you will all give me a chance to be better." The auditorium was silent for a moment. Then slowly, some students began to clap. Others joined in. Soon the whole room was applauding, not because they forgave Krex completely, but because he had taken the first step. He had admitted he was wrong. That took courage too, a different kind of courage than Katie had shown. But courage nonetheless. Maybe things really could change at the academy. Maybe this was the beginning of something better. The news about Katie and Krex spread far beyond the academy. Within 3 days, it had reached every planet in the Galactic Federation. The video was watched billions of times. News channels across the galaxy were talking about it. Some called it the incident. Others called it the awakening. Everyone had an opinion about what it meant. On Earth, Katie's parents got hundreds of messages. Some were from news reporters wanting interviews. Others were from people saying Katie was a hero. A few were angry, saying she had been too violent. Katie's mom called her using the long-distance communication system. It was expensive to call across space, but she needed to hear her daughter's voice. Katie told her mom she was fine. Everything was okay. She promised to be careful. Her mom cried a little, then laughed, then told Katie she was proud of her. At the Federation Council, the leaders of different worlds were having serious discussions. Some species were worried that humans might be dangerous. Others argued that humans had only defended themselves. The debate went on for hours. Finally, Ambassador Helena Price was asked to speak. She was Earth's representative, and this was her chance to explain humanity to the galaxy. Ambassador Price stood before the council. She was a tall woman with gray hair and kind eyes. She had been a teacher before becoming a diplomat. She knew how to explain things clearly. She began by saying that she understood their concerns. Humans were new to the galactic community. There was much the galaxy didn't know about them. But fear was not the answer. Understanding was. She explained that humans had a difficult history. They had fought wars against each other for thousands of years. They had struggled with violence and hatred and prejudice. But they had also learned from their mistakes. They had created art and music and literature. They had developed medicine and science and technology. They had learned to cooperate, to build communities, to care for those who were weak or sick or different. Ambassador Price showed the council statistics that surprised them. In the 3 years since joining the Federation, humans had contributed more medical research than many species had in decades. Human doctors had developed new treatments for diseases that affected multiple alien species. Human engineers had improved ship designs to be more efficient. Human artists had created works that moved beings across the galaxy to tears. Yes, humans could fight, but they preferred to build and heal and create. She said humanity's ability to defend itself should not be seen as a threat. It should be seen as an asset. The galaxy was not always peaceful. There were dangers out there. Pirates and criminals and hostile forces. Having allies who could fight when necessary was valuable. But the real value of humanity was not their combat ability. It was their resilience, their creativity, and their compassion. The council members listened carefully. Some were convinced. Others were still uncertain. But Ambassador Price had planted a seed of understanding. She had shown them that humans were complex, just like every other species. They could not be judged by one incident or one characteristic. They had to be understood as a whole. Back at the academy, life was changing in unexpected ways. Katie had become something of a celebrity, but she tried to stay focused on her studies. She made friends with Lyra, Click, Palm, and Shine. They studied together, ate meals together, and explored the campus together. They were a strange group, 5 completely different species, but they fit together perfectly. One day, something surprising happened. Krex approached Katie in the library. She tensed up when she saw him coming. Her instincts told her to be ready to defend herself again, but Krex held up his hands in a peaceful gesture. He asked if he could talk to her for a moment. Katie looked around. The library was full of other students. She felt safe enough. She nodded and told him to sit down. Krex sat down carefully. He looked uncomfortable, like he wasn't sure what to say. Finally, he spoke. He said he had been thinking a lot about what happened, about who he had been and who he wanted to be. He admitted that he had been a bully his whole life. It was how he was raised. On his homeworld, being aggressive and dominant was encouraged. Weakness was punished, but he was starting to see that there were different kinds of strength. Katie listened without interrupting. Krex continued. He said he had apologized to many of the students he had hurt. Some forgave him. Others didn't, and he understood why. He had caused them real pain and fear. He couldn't expect them to forget that quickly, but he was trying to change. He wanted to learn how to be better, and he wanted to know if Katie would be willing to teach him. Katie was surprised. She asked what he wanted to learn. Krex said he wanted to learn human martial arts, not to hurt people but to understand the philosophy behind it. He had done some research. He learned that human martial arts were about discipline and respect and self-control. They were about using force only when necessary. He wanted to learn those values. He wanted to understand what real strength meant. Katie thought about it for a long moment. Part of her didn't want to help him. He had hurt people. He had tried to hurt her. But another part of her remembered what her judo instructor had always said. The purpose of martial arts is not to create fighters, it's to create better people. If Krex really wanted to change, shouldn't she give him that chance? Katie told Krex that she would think about it. But first he had to prove he was serious. He had to continue apologizing to the students he had hurt. He had to show through his actions that he was changing, and he had to promise that if she taught him, he would never use what he learned to hurt innocent people. Krex agreed to all of this. He thanked her and left the library. Katie watched him go, wondering if she was making the right decision. Over the next few weeks, Katie observed Krex carefully. She saw him eating alone in the cafeteria, away from his old friends who still wanted to bully others. She saw him helping a smaller student pick up dropped books. She heard from other students that he had apologized to them sincerely. He was really trying to change. It wasn't easy for him. His whole culture was based on dominance and aggression. But he was fighting against his own nature to become something better. Katie talked to her human friends about the situation. Lucas, the big guy who played football on Earth, thought she should teach Krex. He said everyone deserves a second chance. Sophie, the Brazilian jiu-jitsu expert, was less sure. She worried that Krex might be manipulating Katie, but she agreed to meet with him to judge his intentions for herself. The meeting happened in one of the academy's training rooms. Katie, Lucas, and Sophie sat on one side. Krex sat on the other. Sophie asked him direct questions. Why did he want to learn martial arts? What would he do with that knowledge? How could they trust him? Krex answered honestly. He said he wanted to learn control. He wanted to understand discipline. He wanted to prove to himself and others that he could be more than a bully. He understood that they might never fully trust him, but he hoped to earn their respect over time. Sophie looked at Katie and Lucas. They had a silent conversation with their eyes. Then Sophie nodded. She told Krex that they would give him a chance. But there would be rules. He would train with them 3 times a week. He would follow their instructions exactly, and if they ever felt he was using his training to hurt others, they would stop teaching him immediately. Krex agreed to all of this. He seemed genuinely grateful. The training sessions began. Katie, Lucas, and Sophie taught Krex basic techniques, but they also taught him the philosophy behind martial arts. They explained that true masters avoided fights whenever possible, that discipline meant controlling your temper, that strength meant protecting the weak, not exploiting them. Krex absorbed these lessons like a sponge absorbs water. He was learning a completely different way of thinking. Word spread about the training sessions. Other students became curious. Some of them had been bullied by others, not just Krex. They wanted to learn how to defend themselves too. They wanted to feel safe and confident. Katie, Lucas, and Sophie talked it over. They decided to open up their training sessions to anyone who wanted to join. They would create a self-defense club. The club grew quickly. Students from many different species joined. There was Zarek, a Krillian who had been bullied for years. There was Pip, a tiny flying creature who wanted to learn confidence. There was Granite, A strong but gentle being made of rock who wanted to learn how to be strong without being aggressive. The training room became a place of learning and growth. But the most surprising member of the club was Krex. The former bully became one of the most dedicated students. He practiced harder than anyone. He helped other students who were struggling. He encouraged those who felt discouraged. He was becoming living proof that people could change, that redemption was possible, that your past didn't have to define your future. The Academy noticed these changes. Bullying incidents decreased dramatically. Students felt safer. The atmosphere became more positive. Professor Zentar observed it all with satisfaction. He had hoped that Katie's incident with Krex would lead to positive change, but this exceeded his expectations. The students weren't just learning to coexist. They were learning from each other. They were becoming a real community. 6 months passed since Katie first arrived at the academy. The whole atmosphere of the school had changed. Students walked through the hallways without fear. Different species mixed together freely. The cafeteria that used to be divided by species was now filled with mixed groups. Friendships formed across worlds and cultures. It was like the academy had woken up from a bad dream. The self-defense club had grown to over 200 members. They had to split into different groups because the training room couldn't hold everyone at once. Katie, Lucas, and Sophie trained the advanced students. Those students then taught the beginners. It became a system where everyone helped everyone else. The club wasn't just about fighting anymore. It was about building confidence and community. Krex had become one of the assistant instructors. This shocked many students who remembered the old Krex, but those who trained with him saw a different person. He was patient with struggling students. He encouraged those who felt weak. He shared his own story of change to inspire others. He proved that being strong didn't mean being cruel. Real strength meant lifting others up, not pushing them down. One evening, Katie and Krex were alone in the training room after everyone else had left. They were putting away equipment and cleaning the mats. Krex seemed like he wanted to say something but wasn't sure how to start. Katie noticed and told him to just say whatever was on his mind. They had trained together for months now. They had become something like friends, though neither of them would have believed that was possible 6 months ago. Krex said he wanted to thank Katie, not just for teaching him martial arts, but for giving him a second chance. He said that back on his homeworld, mistakes were not forgiven. Weakness was not tolerated. Once you failed, you were marked as a failure forever. But humans seemed to believe in redemption. They believed people could change and grow. That concept was foreign to him before, but now he understood it, and it had changed his life. Katie put down the mat she was holding. She said that humans weren't perfect. They made mistakes too. They had their own bullies and problems. But yes, most humans believed in second chances. They believed that people were capable of change if they really wanted to. She told Krex that he had done the hard work. She just pointed him in the right direction. The change came from him, from his own choice to be better. Krex nodded slowly. Then he said something that surprised Katie. He said he had been in contact with his family on his home world. He had told them about his transformation. At first they were angry and ashamed. They said he had become weak, that he had betrayed Zarkoth values, but Krex didn't give up. He kept talking to them, explaining what he had learned. Slowly, some of them started to listen. His younger brother was especially interested. He wanted to know more about human philosophy and martial arts. Katie felt excited hearing this. If Krex's family was open to change, maybe other Zarkoth would be too. Maybe the ripples from that 30-second encounter in the plaza were spreading further than anyone had imagined. She told Krex that if his brother wanted to learn, they would welcome him to the academy. The club was open to anyone who came with good intentions and a willingness to learn. The academy year moved forward. Students prepared for their final projects. This was a big part of their education. They had to work in teams to solve a real problem facing the galaxy. The projects were presented to judges who were important leaders from different worlds. The best projects would be considered for actual implementation by the Federation. Katie and her friends decided to work together. The team included Katie, Krex, Lyra, Click, Palm, Shine, Lucas, and Sophie. 8 students from 8 different worlds. They spent weeks discussing what problem they wanted to address. They considered environmental issues, medical challenges, and technological improvements. But they kept coming back to one theme: understanding between species, breaking down barriers, preventing the kind of prejudice and bullying that had been so common. Their final project proposal was called the Cultural Exchange Initiative. The idea was simple but powerful. Instead of just having students study at academies, they would live with host families from other worlds. A human student might spend a month living with a Zarkoth family. A Voxian student might live with a human family on Earth. By experiencing daily life with other species, students would develop real understanding and empathy. The project also included training programs. Not just martial arts, but all kinds of skills. Species would teach each other their unique abilities. Humans could teach endurance training and problem solving. Zarkoth could teach strength training and discipline. Krillians could teach patience and careful planning. Every species had something valuable to share. The goal was to create a galaxy where diversity was celebrated, not feared. They worked on the presentation for months. Everyone contributed their skills. Katie helped write the speech. Krex created training videos showing how martial arts could be adapted for different body types. Lyra designed the visual presentation with beautiful graphics. Click researched the psychological benefits of cultural exchange. Palm found funding sources. Shine calculated the logistics. Lucas and Sophie created demonstration materials. It was truly a team effort. The day of the presentation arrived. The auditorium was packed. Students, teachers, and important visitors from across the galaxy filled every seat. Katie felt nervous as her team walked onto the stage. This was bigger than any test or competition. This was about changing the galaxy. She looked at her teammates. They looked nervous too, but also determined. They had worked too hard to let fear stop them now. Katie began the presentation. She spoke clearly and confidently. She told the story of her first day at the academy. How she had been confronted by a bully. How she had defended herself. But more importantly, how that moment had led to unexpected friendship and growth. She explained that conflict often came from misunderstanding and fear. When species didn't know each other, they made assumptions. Those assumptions led to prejudice. And prejudice led to pain. Then Krex stepped forward. He spoke about his own transformation. He admitted his past mistakes openly. He talked about how human philosophy and training had changed him from a bully to someone who wanted to help others. He said that if he could change, anyone could change. But change required exposure to new ideas and new perspectives. That's what their project would provide. The rest of the team presented different aspects of the project. Lyra talked about the psychological benefits. Click discussed the practical implementation. Palm covered the financial aspects. Shine showed the data supporting their approach. Lucas and Sophie demonstrated how physical training could be adapted for different species. Each presentation segment built on the previous one, creating a complete and convincing argument. When they finished, the auditorium was silent for a moment. Then Ambassador Price, who was sitting in the front row, stood up and began clapping. Others joined her. Soon the entire auditorium was on their feet, applauding. The judges were nodding and making notes. Even the strictest-looking judge, a crystalline being from a very traditional culture, seemed impressed. The team waited nervously for 3 days while the judges made their decision. During those days, they couldn't stop thinking about the project. They had put so much work into it. They believed in it so strongly. But would the judges see its value? Would they be willing to take a chance on such an ambitious program? The uncertainty was hard to bear. Finally, the results were announced. Their project had won first place. But more than that, the Federation Council had decided to fund a pilot program. They would start with 10 participating worlds and 100 students. If the pilot was successful, they would expand it across the entire Federation. Katie and her team were invited to help design and implement the program. Their school project was becoming a real initiative that could change the galaxy. That night, the team celebrated together. They went to a restaurant near the academy that served food from many different worlds. They laughed and told stories and planned for the future. Katie looked around the table at her friends. A human, a Zarkoth, a Xenos, a Krillian, a Fluffer, a Silicate, and 2 more humans. 6 months ago, some of them had been enemies. Now they were friends working together to make the galaxy better. Krex raised his glass in a toast. It was a human custom he had learned to appreciate. He said, "Here's to Katie Morgan, who taught a bully that real strength comes from helping others. Here's to second chances, and here's to proving that anyone from any world can change and grow." The others raised their glasses too. They all drank together, friends from across the galaxy, united by a belief that understanding could overcome fear. Katie smiled. She thought back to that first day standing in the plaza, facing Krex's aggression. Those 30 seconds had changed everything, but not in the way she had expected. Yes, she had defended herself. Yes, she had shown that humans were not to be underestimated, but the real change came after. The real victory was not in defeating Krex, but in helping him become better. That was the true power of humanity. Not their ability to fight, but their ability to inspire change in others. 2 years had passed since Katie's first day at the academy. She was now in her final year of studies, preparing to graduate. The Cultural Exchange Initiative had exceeded everyone's expectations. What started as a pilot program with 100 students now included thousands of participants across 50 worlds. Students were living with host families, learning new languages, experiencing different cultures. The program was breaking down barriers that had existed for generations. Katie had spent the summer on the Zarkoth homeworld as part of the exchange program. She lived with Krex's family, which was a strange and wonderful experience. The planet was harsh and hot. The cities were built like fortresses. Everything about Zarkoth culture emphasized strength and endurance. But Katie also saw things that surprised her. Zarkoth parents were deeply protective of their children. They had strong family bonds. They valued honor and loyalty. They weren't so different from humans after all. They just expressed these values in different ways. During her time there, Katie taught martial arts classes to young Zarkoth. At first, many were skeptical. Why would warriors need to learn from a human? But Katie showed them that martial arts weren't just about fighting. They were about control, discipline, and using your mind as much as your body. The young Zarkoth were fascinated. Some of them had never thought about combat as anything other than pure aggression. This new approach opened their eyes to different possibilities. Krex had also participated in the exchange program. He spent 3 months on Earth, living with Katie's family in Denver. Her parents were nervous at first. Having an 8-foot-tall alien warrior in their house was intimidating. But Krex was gentle and respectful. He helped with chores. He played with Katie's younger sister. He even learned to cook human food, though his first attempt at making pancakes was a disaster. Katie's family ended up loving him. When it was time for him to leave, her mom cried and made him promise to visit again. The exchange program had created countless stories like these. A human engineer learned advanced energy techniques from the Voxians. A Krillian artist studied Earth music and created a fusion style that became popular across multiple worlds. A young silicate spent time on Earth and became fascinated by human literature, eventually translating dozens of books into her language. Each exchange created connections and understanding that would last a lifetime. The self-defense club at the academy had also grown beyond anything Katie had imagined. It was now an official part of the curriculum. Students could take it as an elective course. Multiple instructors taught different styles adapted for different body types. The club had spawned similar programs at other academies across the galaxy. The philosophy of using strength to protect others rather than dominate them was spreading. Katie had been offered several opportunities for after graduation. Universities wanted her to come teach. Companies wanted to hire her as a consultant. Even the Federation military had approached her about creating training programs. But Katie had different plans. She wanted to continue the work she had started. She wanted to expand the Cultural Exchange Initiative even further. She believed that true peace came from understanding, not from force. Ambassador Price had been following Katie's journey closely. She had watched this young girl become a leader and an inspiration. One day, she invited Katie to her office for a private meeting. The office was impressive, with windows looking out over the capital city of Zentara Prime. The ambassador offered Katie a position on her diplomatic team. She said that Katie had a gift for bringing beings together. That gift was rare and valuable. The galaxy needed more people like her. Katie was honored but uncertain. She was only 19 years old. Diplomacy was a career for experienced adults, not for someone fresh out of school. But Ambassador Price laughed and said that sometimes the best diplomats were the ones who hadn't been trained in traditional ways. Katie didn't think like a politician. She thought like a problem solver. She saw beings as individuals, not as representatives of their species. That perspective was exactly what the Federation needed. Katie asked if she could think about it. She wanted to discuss it with her friends and family. Ambassador Price agreed. and told her to take all the time she needed. As Katie left the office, she felt overwhelmed. Her life had changed so much in 2 years. She had come to the academy, just hoping to learn about other species. Instead, she had somehow become a symbol of human potential and a bridge between worlds. It was a lot of responsibility for one person. That evening, Katie met with her close friends at their usual spot on the observation deck. The stars stretched out endlessly before them. Crex, Lyra, Click, Palm, Shine, Lucas, and Sophie were all there. They had become like family to each other. Katie told them about the ambassador's offer. She asked for their advice. Should she take it? Was she ready for such a big responsibility? Crex spoke first. He said that Katie had changed his life completely. If she could do that for one person, imagine what she could do for whole worlds. He believed she should accept the position. Lyra agreed. She said that Katie had a natural ability to understand different perspectives. That was the essence of diplomacy. Click added that Katie had already proven herself. The Cultural Exchange Initiative was changing the galaxy. Why stop now? Palm, always the practical one, pointed out that Katie would have support. She wouldn't be working alone. Ambassador Price had a whole team of experienced diplomats. Katie would learn from them while contributing her unique perspective. Shine said that every great leader had to start somewhere. Katie's journey had begun with a 30-second encounter in a plaza. Who knew where it might lead next? Lucas and Sophie, her fellow humans, reminded her of something important. Humans had only been part of the galactic community for 5 years. Earth was still learning its place in the universe. Having someone like Katie in a diplomatic position would be good for humanity. She could represent Earth's values of compassion, resilience, and belief in second chances. She could show the galaxy what humans really stood for. Katie listened to all of them. Then she looked out at the stars and thought about everything that had happened. 2 years ago, she had been a scared girl facing down a bully. She had defended herself out of necessity, not knowing that it would start a chain of events that would change so many lives. She thought about all the students who had joined the Self-Defense Club, all the participants in the Cultural Exchange Initiative, all the beings who were learning to see past their differences and find common ground. She realized that she didn't have a choice. Well, she had a choice, but the answer was obvious. This was what she was meant to do. Not because she was special or particularly talented, but because she cared. She cared about making things better. She cared about helping beings understand each other. She cared about building a galaxy where no one had to feel afraid or small or less than others. If she could do anything to make that happen, she had to try. Katie told her friends that she would accept the ambassador's offer. They cheered and hugged her. Even Click, who didn't really hug because of his exoskeleton, made a gesture that conveyed the same emotion. They stayed on the observation deck late into the night, talking about the future and remembering the past. They made promises to stay in touch no matter where their careers took them. They had become more than friends. They had become proof that the galaxy could work together. Graduation day arrived. The ceremony was huge and formal. Thousands of students from hundreds of worlds received their diplomas. Important beings from across the galaxy attended. Katie sat with her class, wearing the ceremonial robes of the academy. When her name was called, she walked across the stage. Professor Zentar, who was presenting the diplomas, smiled at her with all 3 eyes. He whispered congratulations and told her he was proud of who she had become. After the ceremony, there was a reception. Katie's parents had traveled from Earth to attend. They hugged her tightly and told her they loved her. Her mom cried happy tears. Her dad kept saying he couldn't believe his little girl was going to be a diplomat. Katie's friends introduced themselves to her parents. Her mom especially loved meeting Crex. She hugged him and thanked him for being such a good friend to her daughter. Crex looked uncomfortable but pleased. As the reception wound down, Katie found herself alone with Crex for a moment. They stood near a window watching the 3 suns of Zentara Prime begin to set. The sky turned shades of purple and orange that didn't exist on Earth. Crex said he wanted to thank Katie one more time, not just for teaching him or for giving him a second chance, but for showing him that there was more to life than what he had been taught. That strength could mean many things. That honor came from how you treated others, not from how many fights you won. Katie smiled and said she should thank him too. If he hadn't grabbed her shoulder that day, none of this would have happened. She wouldn't have found her purpose. She wouldn't have made such amazing friends. She wouldn't have discovered that she could make a difference. In a strange way, his mistake had been a gift. It had set both of them on paths they never would have found otherwise. Krex thought about that for a moment. Then he laughed, a deep rumbling sound. He said he had never thought about it that way. Maybe some mistakes were meant to happen. Maybe the universe,